America, bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. This is The Rundown, the first segment of every day's radio show. And I must say, I came into the studio this morning, and there were pieces of Mike Bloomberg everywhere. Took a while to clean up, but we're kind of organized. We're ready to go. But, I mean, when you got Bloomberg on the ceiling and Bloomberg on the floor and Bloomberg on the windows, Bloomberg everywhere. Bloomberg got blown up last night. I mean, just demolished. I felt bad for the little guy. It was just really not even fair. If it had happened on a schoolyard, the nuns would have stopped it at my elementary school. First, some updates on coronavirus, because it, after all, is actually killing people. A lot of people. The deaths are told are now 2,129 with 75,754 cases. Most of those are in mainland China, but Japan and South Korea are now surging. In South Korea, cases soared by nearly 2/3. Mostly in the southern part of the peninsula. The mayor of the town of Daegu, the city where 10 South Koreans contracted the disease from a church service, asked residents to stay indoors. Iran has also reported that 2 people had died. China only totaled 394 new infections and 136 deaths through Wednesday. But South Korea had its first death. And in Japan, 2 passengers from the horribly stricken Diamond Princess cruise ship died on Thursday. Iran's cases, 3 of them, have appeared in the holy city of Qum, raising fears of many new cases appearing in the Middle East. North Korea continued to say everything is just fine. Just fine. I'm not sure I believe them. China now seizes hotels, hospitals, and cars to fight the coronavirus, according to the Financial Times. Emergency requisitioning of private hospitals, hotels, apartments, cars, even face masks, as the country's rising number of coronavirus patients threatens to overwhelm local government facilities. The South China Morning Post quotes John Evans, managing director of Tractus Asia, a company that has for 20 years helped firms move to China. Mr. Evans says, quote, "This is a black swan event, and I don't think we've seen anything like it in recent history in terms of economic and supply chain impact in China and across the globe." Going to get worse, folks, before it gets better. In Germany, a horrible atrocity, a xenophobic shooter, that's what the public prosecutor general said, killed 11 people, including himself, as patrons gathered in a hookah bar located in Berlin. A very sad day in Germany. Non-related, but also having German in the headline, is Germany's ambassador from the United States, Rick Grinnell, has been named to be the new Director of National Intelligence and acting Director of National Intelligence, making him the first openly gay member of the United States cabinet. Donald Trump did that. Until recent decades, LGBTQ could not serve openly in the intelligence community. Now, a gay man will lead the intelligence community under Donald Trump. Hysteria broke out among the Never Trump rump and the Never Trumpers and the Trump derangement syndrome afflicted, saying Rick Grinnell isn't qualified. He's only spent 8 years at the UN. He's only spent 2 years as ambassador. He's had a decade with all the top clearances one could have, dealing with the most sensitive diplomatic matters and dealing with intelligence. But since he doesn't have CIA behind his name or DNI, they're upset with it. What they're really upset with is he's a very ferocious defender of the President of the United States. Great appointment, Donald Trump. Great appointment. Rick Grinnell will be great in that job. He's not leaving the German ambassadorship. I suspect he will go back. I also suspect he will end up on the campaign. But for the next 4, 5, 6 months, he'll be running the intelligence community. Now to this debate. Wah! Let's start with the killer app. Cut number 1, Elizabeth Warren decides to take Mike Bloomberg and cut him in half. Cut number 1.
I'd like to talk about who we're running against. A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. Democrats are not going to win if we have a nominee who has a history of hiding his tax returns, of harassing women, and of supporting racist policies like redlining and stop and frisk. Look, I'll support whoever whoever the Democratic nominee is. But understand this, Democrats take a huge risk if we just substitute one arrogant billionaire for another. This country has worked for the rich for a long time.
All right,
and left
Elizabeth Warren, you
everyone
get her drift? Well, a little bit later, Mike Bloomberg gets hits again by Bernie Sanders, and he gets angry, and he gives every Republican the license to use the C word, cut number 7.
Bloomberg, you own a large company. Would you support what Senator Sanders is proposing?
Absolutely not. I can't think of ways that would make it easier for Donald Trump to get reelected than listening to this conversation. It's ridiculous. We're not going to throw out capitalism. We tried that. Other countries tried that. It was called communism, and it just didn't work.
Oh, you hear that? They'll say, no, because that means he's calling Bernie a communist, which means every Republican can call the policy that Bernie Sanders advances communist. Meanwhile, over on one side, Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar were having a knife fight, and nobody noticed. It began this way, cut number 13.
So that dreamers and others who were undocumented were able to navigate everyday life. We stood up for those rights and stood with members of our community with the message that they were as American as we are. A los soñadores hay que decir que este país es tu país también.
I wish everyone was as perfect. I wish everyone was as perfect as you, Pete, but let me tell you what it's like to be in the arena.
I wish everyone could be as perfect as you, Pete. How bitter is Amy Klobuchar and envious of Pete Buttigieg? Meanwhile, they decided to keep going. Cut number 14 is the knockdown drag out between Pete and Amy.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't liken this to trivial. I actually didn't know how many members were in the Knesset, so
well,
you got me there.
Go.
But you're staking your candidacy on your Washington experience. You're on the committee that oversees border security. You're on the committee that does trade. You're literally in part of the committee that's overseeing these things, and we're not able to speak to literally the first thing about the politics of the country to ourselves.
Are you trying to say that I'm dumb, or are you mocking me here, Pete?
I'm saying that you shouldn't trivialize
I made
that
an error. People sometimes forget names. I am the one that has, number one, has the experience based on passing over 100 bills. If I could respond, this was a pretty big allegation. He's basically saying that I don't have the experience to be president of the United States. I have passed over 100 bills as the lead Democrat since being in the U.S. Senate. I am the one, not you, that has won statewide in congressional district after congressional district. And I will say, when you tried in Indiana, Pete, to run, what happened to you? You lost by over 20 points to someone who later lost to my friend Joe Donnelly. So don't tell me about experience. What unites us here is we want to win. Right. And I think we should put a proven winner in charge of the ticket.
This is a race for president. This is a race for president. If winning a race for Senate in Minnesota translated directly to becoming president, I would have grown up under the presidency of Walter Mondale. This is different. And the reason that I think we need to talk about Washington experience is that we should ask what that experience has led to. Experience is, and certainly tenure is not always the same thing as judgment. If we're going to talk about votes in the Senate in Washington, let's talk about it.
So I went on. We'll play more of it later. Let's get a couple of post-debate quick reactions. Dana Bash, cut number 16 from CNN.
It would be nice if he did another major interview, major interview. And you're right. I mean, they're going to have to come up with some answer and do it quickly because, you know, it was funny what you said about the fact that his best moments weren't when he wasn't speaking, but that was the sound of silence that was deafening.
Maybe not so good.
That he didn't have an answer for the NDA. But I have to tell you, I'm hearing from the Trump campaign, and they're thrilled. As you can imagine.
Of course they are. Van Jones on CNN sums it up. Cut number 20.
This was a disaster for Bloomberg. Bloomberg went in as the Titanic, billion-dollar machine Titanic. Titanic meet iceberg Elizabeth Warren. She took him to task in a way that I've never seen in a debate. She took it over. She prosecuted him. But the worst part about it is, for me, a lot of African Americans are placing great hope in Bloomberg. Despite the stop and frisk and all that sort of stuff, you're seeing people trying to move over there. And he just wasn't ready. He was tone deaf.
Not ready? Not ready? That's like saying I could step into the ring in Ali's on the other side in 1972. Not ready. Oh, my gosh, you got put in the wood chipper. There isn't anything left of Mike Bloomberg. Get the glue, the Elmer's glue. Get some duct tape. Maybe he'll be ready for South Carolina. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders is on his way to the nomination. I'll be right back. That's the rundown for today, Thursday, February 20th, 2020.